Welcome back to the Revolution of Being podcast. Today, Angie and I are going to talk about how disease manifests in our body when we haven't dealt with unprocessed trauma and emotions. We're going to reference different books like The Body Keeps the Score, The Emotion Code, which is actually sitting behind me. But this is an epidemic, I think, probably in the world, but very much in America, where we have chronic illness, and the Western medicine model doesn't really address the inner workings of our body and how they're attached to our emotions. I actually just started reading a book, Angie, about the polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve and how that regulates so many of our internal organs, from our heart to our digestion and so on and so forth. And it's fascinating. I didn't know this. I know I suffered with a lot of different ailments from my youth all the way up until adulthood, anywhere from um, obstructed bowel to ovarian cysts and things like that. Lots of surgeries, lots of health issues, chronic illness, but I I have learned in life that a lot of it is my repressed emotions and undealt with things, and that's what we're collectively healing from. So, I don't know, let's talk about it.
Yeah, so this is kind of a follow-up to our last episode, and I think this is such a great conversation because we are in the throes of profound amounts of health issues. And I had just listened to a podcast by Dr. Mark Hyman. If you don't follow him, run, don't walk to add his podcast because he talks about the nature of our health. He doesn't so much necessarily address the emotional components, um, but there are some podcasts that do speak about the psycho-emotional elements and disease. But Mark had said, I think it was just last week on an Ozempic podcast, that 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So that means we have excess inflammation, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, our A1Cs, so our pre-diabetes, score is elevated. So something, we're unhealthy. And that's, me too. Like I am a thin person, but I know that I am metabolically not super healthy. I'm making a bunch of changes to improve that now that I know better. And, this is a big deal because it starts within the mind, the trauma, all this stuff is a huge part of why we eat the way we do. Like, yes, we can blame the ultra processed foods, the toxins we're exposed to, all these things in our environment that were not here 100 years ago. But what's not really addressed in this, health movement is the emotions. And I think there's more attention being placed there because people like me, people like you, hit a wall with our healing because we're like, I'm doing all the right things, air quote, I'm doing everything I should. I'm eating the right way. I'm exercising. I'm trying to get enough rest, and I'm still stalled out. And when that's the case, that is oftentimes, your sign to turn in. And in fact, I hope that in the future we flip this paradigm and say, hey, before you go seek any kind of other care, do the internal work first. Unless it's a crisis, right? Like if you're in a crisis, yes, you need to get support. But when you're starting to have symptoms, your body's telling you like there's something going on. And, I outsourced so much of my power to so-called experts because I didn't want to have to be the person to have to figure it out. I've been a nurse my whole life, my adult life. I'm a parent, I'm a caregiver, I'm a business owner. I'm freaking tired, right? So I just wanted someone to tell me how to fix it. And I spent way too much money to hit too many walls, but I learned a lot along the way. And so, to your point, we addressed in the last podcast, some of the things we had experienced over the years in terms of like health issues. And so, like you, I had chronic UTIs. As you were talking too, I was like, oh yeah, I dealt with a lot of constipation as a child, which is so interesting. And then after I had my second child, I developed a bladder prolapse, another root chakra issue, right? And then, once COVID hit 2020, my body went awry because of the profound amount of emotional and psychological stress that was just compounding. It was compounding, compounding, compounding. And then COVID was the catalyst for my body to really move into disease. And for me, that's autoimmunity. And we are, I would say gosh, probably 2/3 of my clients have autoimmunity right now, which is insane because the statistic used to be like, I don't even know, 1 in 10 or something, but I'm like, I feel like it's 50% of people. Like, women are more affected because we are more, unfortunately, more delicate and more susceptible to that because of our hormones. Um, so when it comes to, healing, I had to do, for me, I was doing kind of all the things. I was trying to figure out the diet. I was trying to do the right supplements. I was, doing all this external stuff. And it really came to a point where it's like, you got to go inward. Once I started a really focused meditation practice was when I started to have the answers. I
Mm.
started to figure out like, hey, this stuff isn't helping you out here that much, but tweak this though, tweak this one thing, and that's going to help. And continue to process the emotions that you're not still processing. And that was, again, just even in the last 1 year, I still had a lot of stuff I wasn't dealing with. And it's like layers of an onion, you can't take it all off at once. So healing is not a quick journey when you've been in a pre-diseased state for a very long time. But I truly believe, given the right environment, the body can heal. But that means regulating your nervous system, healing the trauma, crying through the things that have hurt you as a child, grieving, allowing yourself to wail. Other countries, when people die, they wail, they just scream and cry. And here it's just, we don't do that. It's kind of quiet and we all roll up and there's some light tears and we have our tissues and we move about our day, we move about our life and just don't actually go through the process. So, you know, with the epidemic of disease, where I was going with that, sorry, was we have to do the healing work because our kids are going to have the same fate if we don't do what we need to do to heal. If we don't have the conversations with them about what we're going through, if we're not debriefing as parents about that it's safe to process your emotions, it's safe to feel frustrated. Like, yes, you're justified. And I tell my kids that all the time, when they have fits about something, like, it's okay to be frustrated. Yes, but we don't get to hurt people. We don't get to hit. We don't get to do this other stuff. Like, it's okay to cry right now. That's okay, you know? And let's just take a moment to be with that, and kind of stuff that I never had the permission to do. Which already, because I've done the work I am, they're having a different experience of healthily processing through emotions. Because when you process them, it's like, a leaf floating down the river. It just kind of floats on by. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh, I feel better. Okay, cool. Whereas if you suppress, it's like shaking up a soda can and then popping it open and then everything just comes roaring out. So, we want to begin to just start processing. So, an action step, to kind of just dive right into this is when something comes up, give yourself permission without judgment to feel it,
Mhm.
to feel the shame maybe you're feeling, to feel the hurt because someone said something that wasn't kind, to feel angry if, something happened to you that you didn't feel was fair. Let yourself, and then feel it and carry on. Sometimes you're with it for a while because you're just not used to processing things. But the more efficient you get at this, the quicker the process is and the quicker the rebound is, right?
Yeah.
Like something that used to, for me, anxiety was huge. I had tremendous anxiety because I was always in the state of seeking safety and making sure I was safe. Even again, as early, as recent as a few years ago. And I let myself feel the anxiety, the chest discomfort, the shortness of breath, the swirling of my mind without judgment. And was like, this is where I'm at right now, and that's okay. Simply acknowledging that made it disappear. It's like looking for the boogeyman in the closet and you're terrified to look at it because you're like, oh my God, it's going to get me. And then you open the door, you're like, oh, nothing there. That was not bad.
There's this book out there. While you're talking about this, it's really timely. It's called Waking the Tiger. Have you heard of it? Have you read it?
Mm-mm.
It's about exactly this. It talks about why processing trauma or a moment is so important. And I'm a horse girl, and you can watch animals do this. You can watch a whole animal kingdom do this. So horses are flight animals. That's their stress response. So basically, I ride like a giant deer, right? They'll run into oncoming traffic if they're afraid of something. And so that's kind of a scary thought, but they are traumatized all the time, right? Something falls and they freak out and it's like, oh my God, that's the scariest thing ever. And you'll watch them go through all the emotions. They'll freeze, they'll flee, they'll kick and buck and do all these things. And then it stops and then they're just eating their grass, calm
Yes.
as can be. And you'll watch them like go through the somatics. They'll yawn, they'll shake a little bit. They let their bodies fully go from that point to that point.
Mhm.
And animals do this because, I mean, if you've ever watched like National Geographic, when the gazelle gets chased by the lion or whatever, I mean, they're in flee, they're flighting and they're running and they're scared, they're going to die, all these things. But then when the threat is gone, they they release all that energy. And so in Waking the Tiger they talk about that, and there's a story, it's been a while since I've read it, but there's a story about a group of kids that were taken hostage and they were put into like an underground, it was an actual thing that happened, but they were in like a mine shaft. And at some point they lost hope, but this one kid was like, no, we're going to dig, we're going to claw and dig. And he did all this, and all these kids got out. But he had to actually encourage these kids to get out. They were so stuck in their freeze state. So, post all of that, all these children went to therapy. And the kid that was the one that clawed and fought, he had the best outcome. The rest of them dealt with a lot of emotional, internal illnesses, damage, repressed, uh, complex post traumatic stress, but not the one who was actively clawing. And so, to what you said, it's like allowing our body to really feel the emotions helps us release it. And that's where like somatics come in. It's the act of like shaking, shake it out, run, relive your moments. And what would I do? I would run so fast, I would fight back. Let your body experience. I would cry, I would scream, and somatically release it. That's exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, and it's so huge, to that story with the kids. It's about, kind of in real time letting your body do what it needs to. Now, when disease happens, it's really that stored trauma over time. So we are speaking to, recognizing the triggers that are coming up. And part of that too, it reminds me of a story. So when I was a hospice nurse and I didn't fully understand what I do now about energy, the body, dis-ease. I had a woman, so I was one of the admitting nurses. She was not going to be my patient, but I was helping the team out, and I went to meet this woman in her condo and looked around. She was very like well put together and quite intimidating actually, but just a very sweet lady. As I was talking with her, and she had terminal pancreatic cancer, and so there was something about her I was just so intrigued by. I was like, I gotta know this woman. I want to know her story. I want to know about her. I'm just so curious, right? And so we were starting to do the admission process. Well, she disclosed she was going to go to Mexico to see her shaman and was really hoping for, kind of some healing while she was there. Well, if you start hospice in America, you can't go outside of the country because we can't provide service in Mexico. You can travel to a different state, but you can't go to a different country. So we were like, well, gosh, we're going to have to hold off on your admission until, you get back. But like, best of luck. And again, there was a deep connection with her. And I was like, I want to be the nurse that comes back, if that's okay. Like, I would like to tell, the team I want to come back when you're back from Mexico. So they reassigned me to her when she was back. I think it was like a month later or something, or 3 weeks after. And it was so interesting because I was thinking like, gosh, why did this develop in her? She's, in her early 60s, set for retirement. Like, it was so interesting. Because, oftentimes with cancer, you look to kind of the external things, right? Like, did they drink a lot of alcohol? Was there a family history? Like some of the standard kind of Western stuff. And there was something in me that was like, it's not that, right? So there's something there. So when she got back, she said, well, my shaman had told me that I did this to myself It was my life. It was my lifestyle. So she was in HR and her responsibility was firing people. And
Mhm.
it sucked her soul to do that. She hated it because she felt mean. She didn't have a lot of joy in her life. And when they speak to the pancreas specifically, a lot of books talk about you don't have the sweetness of life. You don't have a lot of joy in your life. And she just said, I understood and I understand. And so it was, again, before I understood the energetics of what was happening, it was resonating in my soul like, yeah, this makes sense. And, she signed on and it was only, gosh, I think a month or two later that she did pass away. But that was kind of my first exposure in hospice to emotional ties with disease. So the point of that is disease can also start because you're in a toxic situation. Are you in a marriage that you've outgrown? It will manifest in disease eventually. You might have a heart attack because you're harboring so much anger towards your spouse or something else, right? Heart failure, or a completely different disease. You might be in a job that is soul sucking, but you stay there because you were like me and you didn't see a different option until you kind of woke up to the fact that that was a choice. So it can also be the relationships you're in, the environments you're in, even maybe the city you live in, right? Like if you're in a place where, you and I live in the Midwest where it is cold and it is dark half the year and it is awful sometimes. And that can be really difficult. So, people can also have these spontaneous healings and remissions by moving environments because they're more connected with nature. They're able to have different foods that calm their nervous system that are more pure than what we have oftentimes in America. Um, and so when I reflect on, the autoimmunity that developed in my body, similar to this woman, I can understand all the traumas that have compacted over the years, the chronic stress. And there's, I think the statistic is something to the effect of like 90% of, or maybe it's more, 90% of hospital and clinic visits are related to stress. You get sick, your immune system's hampered because of stress. Heart attack or heart, anything, chronic stress, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic stress. So, all these things are tied to stress. And that's not to say, there's also, we use the term big V and little v, and we'll say big S and little s. There are little stressors every day, right? Working out is a stress to your body, but it's a good stress. Maybe a small argument with your spouse happened, but it led to a really healing conversation. Little s. Big S is, again, the little s can become big S when you continue to have the exposure to it, though, right? The daily grind of a job you hate. Being a single parent, trying to figure out how you're going to feed your children,
We can call big S sacrifice.
It's, yeah, because you begin to sacrifice your body for that. And so it's kind of taking a mental inventory of where in my life can I just begin to minimize stress? And I understand, we live on this plane where we need to make money. And that's a stress for a lot of people that, you know, is just something that's a part of the human experience. Now, how stressful it is to make that money is a choice. If you're in a job that's terrible, well, you might say, well, the market's terrible. People are getting laid off. All this is happening. Yes, and there are still opportunities. There are, and if you're going to live with a limited mindset, that's a choice too. There are always opportunities. Um, so there's a choice in what you put yourself in stress with. And it's the little things, right? Maybe it's, for me, stopping the hit workouts because that was becoming a big S because my body was in such a state that it just could not tolerate those any longer. So I quit those and I began, I actually stopped doing a lot of workouts and just walked for months because my body couldn't handle even weightlifting. And when I say that, I mean it threw me into insomnia again. I was feeling those anxious symptoms because cortisol was high. I didn't understand what that was at the time. And then I've shifted into weightlifting and I walk most days. And so that's a little bit of gentle kindness to my body where I can still move in the ways that support it because I am at the age where I need to make sure I have good muscle mass and bone density and all that stuff. But I'm not stressing my system with unnecessary stressors. Even what you allow your attention to be on is a choice and can be a stressor. You and I talk about this. Our older kids and their fathers are the best of friends and the arch nemesis. And so this weekend, my husband was getting so riled up with my oldest son. Um, my older son has a wicked amount of independence, self assuredness, strong willedness, and it's brilliant. And it's so hard to parent because when he sets his mind on something, I mean, he does not relent and it is exhausting. However, I am of the mindset of like, pick your battles. Yes, he's dicing apart a flower to try to make paint, and it's a little messy. And he wanted to use that paint to recreate the flower on paper. And it was this whole thing. And my husband was just in a tizzy about it. And like, because my son just gets in these hyper focused things and he wants to do all the things and then he just can't get off it. And I'm in the sauna blanket designing out, like, whatever, like, let him be. It's fine. That's a choice. You're choosing to allow that to stress you out. And I go back to, and I say this all the time, is anybody going to die? No. There might be a mess. Oh, well, it can clean up. So, and that I know that's an extreme thing, and there are things that do need your attention. But stuff like that, like that's a choice to allow yourself to get revved up because that does spawn the fight flight reaction. I mean, the frustration and anger he was starting to feel, he was choosing. And I just wasn't gonna, and it sometimes pisses him off when I don't go at the same level he does. He's like, why aren't you mad too? I'm like, because I don't want to be. Like, that's stupid. Like, why would I do that to myself? So, you can also choose what you allow to give your attention to and to stress you out, is my point. But take inventory. What are the little things that are adding up that you can begin to, you know, look at differently? Maybe take off your list of priorities. Maybe your house isn't perfectly clean. Okay, that's fine. Is anyone going to die? No. Does it matter enough to stress you out to have everything anal retentive perfect? No. And when I drop perfectionism, there are still times I get into that, not often, but man, did my life get easier. I just stopped caring. Like, it's so much easier to not have to worry about that stuff. And that allowed my nervous system to calm down. That allowed me to not feel like I was walking on eggshells of my own creation. So, that's a whole kind of rant about it. But, take inventory of some of the things, if there's a big stressor in your life, like a partner that you're meant to break up with, girl, guy, do it. Like,
Yeah.
if it's affecting your health, and it's not getting better and you've done everything you can do, man, your life will improve, especially when you're out of the energy of that toxicity. And that's a big thing right now for a lot of people. And, it's interesting because I have a lot of clients that come to me and they have dysfunctional relationships because they're like us, they're healing through trauma. Their partners have had trauma. They're the ones doing the work, but their partners aren't. And there comes a point where, you kind of go in two different directions. And so, um, you know, I don't want to say worry, but it's in the back of my head as, oh boy, the healed version of you probably not going to tolerate this anymore. Are you prepared for what that's going to bring? And I think that's also a big part of why people don't want to do that work, is because they're scared of what's going to happen on the other side, because the healed version of you will not tolerate what the unhealed version did. I promise you that. I
Yeah.
promise you that.
But to pick your
So
pain.
it's disruptive to your life, but in the best way. And you and I are of the mindset of anything that's not in alignment with our highest good, get the fuck out of the way. I don't want it. If that means relationships, bye. If that means a certain way of being, okay, peace. If that means me giving up, gluten, dairy for life because my body doesn't tolerate it, okay, so what? I feel so much better having um, that clarity, being in highest alignment, having that control over my life, because we all do. And then when you do those things, again, your body is primed to heal. You will not heal if you are doing the things your body's asking you to do, but you have to pay attention. And, I will also say, speaking of end of life, you can heal at end of life too. It doesn't mean you're healing your physical body, but you can heal spiritually, emotionally. You can tie up loose ends, and that is still healing. And your body still may be at a point where, the time is up, and that's just destiny at that point. Like, that's what it's meant to be. But before you get to that point, there's a shit ton of stuff you can do to really set yourself up well. Um, so
Yeah. I think the other side of that too is you've got to you've got to have an intimate relationship with your body. You have to know what it feels like to feel the response in your body. I think a lot of people walk around numb. That's the gift of Western medicine in many ways, right? We medicate you till you don't feel the symptom anymore. A lot of people don't even know what it's like to feel good. So they don't know that not having a stomach ache most days is what it should be like. I can speak for myself there. But until you know your body, it can be hard to figure that out. And being somebody like you who grew up with chronic illnesses, fatigue, I mean, now I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I slept all the time because my nervous system was shot as a child. It was labeled as depression. I was put into counseling and given Ativan, but that's not what the problem was. My nervous system couldn't regulate. My body was preserving all of its energy to keep me alive. And so I know when I get those really heavy fatigue symptoms now as an adult, and there it's if you can relate, it's kind of like you've been drugged. It's like I can't even crawl forward. I'm so depleted. I can usually look back and see why, see it clearly. And like you, the workouts, I love intense stuff. I mean, all the way around the workouts, I can push myself past points of pain. I have willpower like crazy. I can do insane things. I don't know if I should be proud of that, but workouts were almost killed me. I got rhabdo, if you're familiar with that, back in I think it was like 2014. I got rhabdo. I should have died. I got it doing CrossFit, negatives. And I mean, my goodness, my body was like, ah, those are not micro tears, those are macro tears. And, here's all your myoglobin right into your blood system, right? And again, my body was like, no, and I can't tolerate those workouts either because my stress is my hormones are way too delicate. Those stress hormones, I have never really gotten to a point where I can be like, yes, I have fully balanced my cortisol. My body is still wanting to run. My body is still wanting to freeze. And I know what that feels like. I know when the shortness of breath sets in. I know when I start to get incredibly tired or when I start to get just slightly shaky or I can't digest food anymore. I get really bloated no matter what I eat. Could just be some vegetables or maybe just a glass of water. And suddenly I'm like, why do I feel like I ate rocks? Um, all those are my signs that I have taken on too much or I haven't dealt with a situation. Um, I can have a negative energy come into my life and boom, symptoms are back.
Yeah.
It's just like a tipping point, but it can happen too if I eat something I shouldn't eat, something that triggers the slightest bit of a response in my body. My body's like, can't deal with that. That's too much. Maybe tomorrow it won't be, but today it is. And so you have to get really comfortable knowing your body because it'll give you a sign. And it's when we ignore the sign or we go and farm it out and say, hey, MD, I've got this going on. Can you write me a script for that? And we just take that and we don't do any of our own work. We never address it and we just cover it up like we do our emotions. We just throw some bandages on it, patch her up. It looks good on the outside and we carry on with life. And that whole thing underneath that's creating the pattern just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And and then we're in our 60s and we have pancreatic cancer and maybe we have that realization. What a beautiful thing to know before the end of your life, though. I think, like liver disease, the liver is the seat of anger. Eastern medicine can teach us so much about how our chakra organ system all work together. I love human design. It uses both. It talks about our chakras. It uses some of the Eastern philosophy and talks about like those areas of our body, what they really do for us. And so if you're kind of new to that philosophy, the root chakra that's your grounding, your safety, your sensuality, your creativity. A lot of that lives there, but that's like your tailbone area. And then as you move up, you're in your solar plexus and your throat and your head, and all those have different organ affiliations. And it might be like your heart chakra could be about forgiveness, but that can lead to lung dysfunction. I get a lot of shortness of breath. I've had my heart just shattered so many times. I'm not surprised. I know that needs support. I need to open my heart up. I need to probably forgive myself, to forgive others and love myself. But that's why I have shortness of breath. I know that could manifest into something bigger if I don't honor the warning signal I'm getting. So the way I've always looked at it is our body gives us the sign. So if you're looking at the dash of your car and you see your little indicator light come on that you're running low on oil, well, you have one of two choices. You can go put oil in your car, or you can put a sticker over the indicator light and be like, well, look, the light's gone. That's what Western medicine kind of does.
It's super
Or we
interesting.
remove the light completely. Look, there is no light.
Yeah.
It can't
Yeah,
flash.
exactly.
There's
It's
no
not
light. We took it out. And I feel like that's kind of the Western medicine model, which is why you could do all that, but at the end of the day you're still gonna drive your car. The car's not going to have any oil, and then it's going to die. And that's the same with our bodies. So get to know your body. And Angie and we've spent insane amounts of money, literally insane amounts of money. I don't unless I break something or have something major that needs to be mended physically, I don't go to the doctor. I'm part of a co-op. I go to like a functional med doc. I do my panels every now and then, like to see where things are at. And I don't know, that's just my lifestyle. I always try to do it myself first. If I need some help, I do turn to other people, but I have gone from being a Western medicine person. I took all of the power I gave to Western medicine and I gave it all to functional health. And I gave them all my money and all my trust. And guess what? The outcome was no different. It just cost me more money. And it's not important, because you and I learned a lot. We became very educated. We basically went to college and spent our own money and our health to be both the curriculum and the student. But you don't have to do it that way, but that might be the way that you get there, and that's okay too, because you will learn. It's not all in vain. We've spent a lot of money. We've learned a lot of things. We've healed some different things, but you and I hit a point where it's like we are not getting anywhere. I could take all the supplements in the world, but now I'm to a point where I have to integrate my mind, body, and soul. And so for me, it's really honoring, what is my body saying? It's saying I need to rest. I need to get over the fact that I think I need to go all the time. And I'm going to go lay down. I'm going to go do my breath work, because I understand I have healing energy within me that I can use. It calms my mind. It calms my body.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to do yoga instead of going for the run. I love the run. I miss the run. I want the run. But I'm going to go do yoga, and I'm going to stretch my body, and I'm going to listen to my body. And you know what? My body responds. It says, thank you. I'm going to cry. I'm going to get that out. My body says, thank you, because I couldn't breathe. You were carrying so much grief in your chest that, right? That's what I needed. And that's what we're talking about. Like, how do we treat disease? Because it's dis-ease. We are not in ease. We're not in flow. And that's not how we're designed. That's not what
No.
this meat suit is supposed to do. And that's why we're here. We're trying to figure it out.
Well, and that is a big part of our culture. The American dream, but it's one of working, 80 hours a week or whatever to make ends meet. It's chronic stress because of the lifestyles we live. We're bombarded with unnatural amounts of energy around us, from communication towers, the Wi-Fi that we're exposed to, again, unnatural food that we have. There's so many stressors on the body that we have to become aware. Like all of these things are the small s adding up in time. That cheeseburger you continue to have at McDonald's every week, that's adding up, causing stress on your body. So I wanted to address, for those who, I have a client right now and she's just amazing. She had said to me, I've had signs for years to slow down and I didn't. And she is in an insane amount of autoimmune, just crippling levels of autoimmunity. And she knew, I mean, the signs were there. And we think we're invincible because when we're young, we can really beat ourselves up and not pay for it. We do. We're taking a loan against our future and we pay for it now, and that's what I'm paying for is all the abuse on the body early on. And I'm so grateful my sweet body has allowed me to do everything I've been able to do to survive. And now I get to really nourish it. And so if people are at that beginning phase of, and I'm just like you were, I don't know what the hell my body's saying. I have symptoms. I don't know what they mean. I live a fast paced lifestyle. What do you suggest? So you mentioned somatics. Somatic therapy is incredible. It helps you slow down and tune in. And there are some great practitioners that can help you just kind of, again, refamiliarize yourself with your body, feel it, process it, grieve, wail, whatever you need to do. I incorporate a lot of that with hypnosis too, because our emotions are somatic. We feel them in our body. And so I like to kind of help my clients tune into that. Breath work is great. It's another awesome way just to kind of get familiar. You're slowing everything down. You're tuning into your breath. You're being more intentional with your body. And that can be, the proper breath work can be very calming. Now, if you're doing extreme breath work where you're holding your breath for 1, 2+ minutes, that's going to enhance your cortisol. I don't suggest that. I think what we're speaking to is more like mindful breathing practices versus like intense psychedelic breath work. Of
Like
course,
box breathing or
yeah,
4-7-8, that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
box,
Yeah.
yep, all of that. And then, of course, I love hypnotherapy, so I'm going to plug that. Yoga as well. I hate yoga. I hate it. Hate
Mm,
it. Hate it. Because it forces me to slow down. So I will not do it unless I'm in a class. Now, I will tell you, the Lifetime Gym in Woodbury has seen many of my tears on that floor when I have bust out crying in a certain pose. I don't know what the hell's coming through. Something's happening. And I'm just like bawling. Thank God they have it dark in there so no one sees me. But I mean, man, I was really releasing emotions in some of the different moves I was doing, which was very healing. Guided imagery or guided meditations are great. I also find therapeutic walking. Like I'll do, 3-mile walks in my neighborhood that's kind of wooded. Um, on the nice days, every day, if it's nice, today I'll be getting out there doing that because it's beautiful here in the Minnesotas. Um, those are helpful because you're mindful in the moment. Don't have your iPod on. Don't have, your do people have, I don't know if they have iPods anymore. Don't have like your podcast playing
right.
anymore. Don't have music on. Don't be looking at your phone. Just be present.
Just be
Be
there.
aware, look at what's around you. You might get some little some little nudges from the animal kingdom, talking to you. Like you and I talk about the signs we get from animals all the time. Um, so those are some ways, there's so many ways. I actually have, and I'll show you guys here. This was inspired by a physical therapist I
Mm,
saw, had this vagus nerve deck, and it's 75 exercises to reset your nervous system by Melissa Romano. So she has, if you want focus or clarity, there's exercises to help that. If you want calming, there's exercises to help that. So it's kind of a cool tool if you're like, I don't know where to start with this. And these are like so simple. They walk you through how to do them. They're very quick exercises. EFT tapping is also really powerful for releasing emotions and just kind of processing through things. So there's a lot of, I only scratched the surface on what you can do. There's so many things. For me, again, it was, you know, processing through the trauma with a coach was, and kind of doing my inner child healing was the start of me, because my nervous system was so wrecked with anxiety that I needed to first get the anxiety controlled
Mhm.
before I could even tune into my body, because that noise was so loud. So once that died down, then I could actually subtly feel the whispers of my body. And, there's a lot of resources too. Again, Chinese medicine, Eastern medicine is amazing with telling you what organs, what joints correlate with what systems. So you could even, I've Google search, like, what is the spiritual meaning of right knee pain? And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Louise Hay is really good. I can't remember the name of her book. It's been a while since I've looked at it,
think you
but
can
she,
heal.
yes, there
Um,
you go. I have it on
oh,
my shelf,
You
but
Can
my
Heal
vision,
Your Life by Louise Hayes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that one's a good one if you just want to have like a book to carry around to look and see. I think I don't know, she probably didn't miss anything in that book. I've had it for 15 years, I swear. It sits on my bookshelf. It's got notes in it. It's all used and worn. But yeah, I think like EMDR can be another physical thing. You can do that for yourself a little bit too. Like if you learn the basics of it, you can go buy paddles. I've had them, and they will help you with that right brain, left brain.
Coherent.
Um, but just stimulation. That's why walking can be so important, because you're going from right to left to right to left. And
Mhm.
so if you even talk to yourself through that.
Mhm.
Have a conversation with yourself while you walk, and let your brain do its brainy things and put things back where they need to be. We
Yeah.
don't pay enough attention, but I promise you that if you allow your body the time to go through what it needs to go through, it's going to give you the reward of feeling more peace, more calm. You're going to physically feel better. And over time, that's going to manifest in your health, just like disease did.
Yeah, and it's not a quick process, to anybody thinking that you can Amazon Prime this or Ozempic it, you can't. Like, we're talking root cause solutions, and that's what you and I will die on the top of a mountain for. Like,
We don't like it either.
nothing that we do within our own practices, within our own health, you know, no long it all encompasses root cause support. There will be, sometimes you need a bandage, to just get by, right? You need that quick bandage to triage the bleeding to whatever, but you got to go back and dig in deeper as to why, this stuff happened, right? So let's say you have Hashimoto's and your thyroid's whacked. You might need thyroid support in the form of some medicine temporarily, because your thyroid's a very important, you know, endocrine organ. So you need that to be functioning. But then you can go back and you can do an elimination diet. You can do the other, nervous system regulation to possibly taper off those things, right? So it is, again, I come from healthcare, as you know, triage it. If it's life threatening, you got to do what you got to do to get stable. But it's so important to go back if you really want true deep healing at a cellular level. You have to do the work. And again, my journey's been 5 years, of intentional work coming up. I released alcohol April 17th, 2020. That was the anniversary of my dad's death 20 years later, my brother's birthday. That was the time where I took back control of my life. And, so we're coming up on a year. By the time this releases, it'll probably be right about that time, or 5 years. So, I have been doing this for 5 years and I still have a ways to go, because there's 40 years of shit in my body that I'm unpacking, and it takes time. But as you said, the reward is so worth it. You get to feel a level of clarity, of focus, of energy, of health and wellness, vitality, all these things that you didn't know you didn't have,
Yeah.
because you were just so used to feeling lousy all the time. And I think that is the American story. People are just fueled by caffeine and crap food, and they don't realize that there's a better way, that the body really is designed to operate so beautifully. So we just have to get the stuff out of the way. And that does take time. And that really is taking a commitment to yourself and an identity shift. You can't outperform your identity. So if your identity is someone who is a traumatized victim, who's overweight, who, lives off of Culver's and Dairy Queen, that's going to be the reality you continue to perpetuate until you dismantle that. And again, starting in the mind, you have to. You're not gonna make those changes unless your subconscious is on board. So, anyways, I know this has been I hope this was a resourceful episode for those who maybe are where we were. I know you're further even ahead of me. You had your journey in the 2010s. Um, but I hope this was resourceful for people that are just beginning to realize there's got to be a different way, and I think that's what we're coming into is, there's a dissolution um, of the illusion. We're dissolving the illusion that we are powerless, that we have to outsource our care to doctors, that it really starts with us. And that's none of our faults. That's how we were indoctrinated. The doctors are the authority. We go every year for our tune up and they'd say we're fine, but work on that cholesterol. But the body is saying a different story. And you're like, well, I don't feel fine. Why are you telling me I'm fine? So, people are coming back to that and you have to do the work yourself. No one can tell you what you need for your circumstance. And it's a commitment, it's a commitment every day to get out of your own way and let your body do what it needs to do, but give it the proper resources to do it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it'll take time, but it doesn't take forever, and you do get rewards along the way. So it's not like you have to wait forever to feel better. You'll feel better. You'll just find another layer. So
mhm. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, and we do hope it's helpful because we've been there, and this is why we're here. This is why we do what we do.
Yeah. All right. Well, have an awesome one and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.